It's already 9 a.m. Here in Washington, so I just wanted to welcome everyone. My name is Fazete Berisha, and I'm part of the Agriculture Global Practice at the World Bank. And I would like to welcome you to the second Climate Smart Agricultural webinar. This event is part of a series of webinars organized by the Global Alliance for Climate Smart Agriculture, which highlights the results of 6 country case studies assessing the state of climate smart agriculture implementation. Through these webinars, the Global Alliance for Climate Smart Agriculture, or GACSA, provides an open forum to discuss the extent to which existing national strategies and programs promote CSA practices in different countries, as well as it examines some of the challenges that countries face in the implementation of the CSA practices. Last week, as you may know, we launched the webinar series with a country case study of Ireland. We heard about Ireland's experience with CSA implementation, the specific policies and practices currently in place in the country, and some of the key challenges that Ireland faces in implementing climate smart agriculture practices. Today, we will hear from our Vietnam country case study, and during the next 3 weeks, we will continue to feature cases from Costa Rica, France, and Malawi. You can register for those webinars via the GACSA website. I will post the link to the GACSA website in the chat box shortly. But I just wanted to say that today I'm really happy to welcome our speaker, Dr. Tran Nghia, the Director of the Department of Natural Resource and Environmental Economic Studies in Vietnam. Dr. Tran is also the head of the Climate Change and REDD Plus Research Group at the Institute of Policy and Strategy for Agriculture and Rural Development within the Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Development in Vietnam. He's also the head of the climate, he's also a member of the Vietnam's NAMA Agricultural Task Force and country point of contact of Global Alliance for Climate Smart Agriculture. Dr. Tran leads a number of climate change projects and is also involved extensively in reviewing policies and providing advice for policymakers in the areas of green growth and sustainable development in the context of restructuring the agricultural sector in Vietnam. Today, Dr. Tran will share with us Vietnam's experience, and he will provide a brief background into the impact of climate change in Vietnam's agricultural sector. He will also talk about the climate smart agricultural policy landscape in the country, and we'll discuss some of the key challenges in the CSA policy implementation. Before I turn it over to Dr. Tran to start his presentation, I wanted to let you know about the format of the webinar. And we will start with a presentation which will be about 30 minutes. And this will be followed with a Q&A session with a speaker for about 20 minutes. But I just wanted to emphasize that you don't have to wait until the end to ask questions. In fact, I encourage you to write your questions throughout the presentation, and you can do that using the chat box located in the lower right-hand corner of the screen. If you currently don't see that chat box, please look for it in the right side of your screen. And at the top, there should be a tab that says Chat. If you click on that, the chat box will be enabled. Please also make sure that your questions are sent to all participants. There's a drop-down menu in the chat option, and you can select who the question goes to, but I would really appreciate if you send it to all participants. That way we'll make sure that we will see it. Also, when asking a question, please indicate the institution that you are part of, as this helps the speaker better understand the context of the question, and in that case, he will also be able to address your question more effectively. Unfortunately, in order to preserve sound quality, we cannot allow the use of microphones among participants. So I appreciate your understanding, and I will do my best to collect and ask all questions at the end of the presentation. We will also conduct a brief survey to find out what you thought about the webinar today. So I encourage you to complete the survey at the end of the webinar, as it helps us understand better the value of these presentations for you. The webinar also will be recorded and posted on the GACSA website. You will also be able to download the PowerPoint presentation from the website as well. You will see a link on that at the end of the webinar, the link to the GACSA website at the end of the webinar presentation. So we will end the webinar within the hour. And within that time frame, I hope that we'll be able to address all of your questions. With that, I would like to turn the microphone over to our speaker, Dr. Tran. And I'm just going to unmute his microphone. So, Tran, can you hear me?
Yeah, yes.
Perfect. Great. So, over to you.
Okay, thank you for the very interesting introduction about me, and thank GACSA for creating the opportunity for us to share the experience from Vietnam. And good evening, everyone from Vietnam. So today I will present in the webinar about the case study in Vietnam with the title Towards Adopting the CSA Practices at the Effective Adaptation Measures Against the Severe Impacts of Climate Change in Vietnam. So my presentation, I can go over the couple of things. Maybe first introduce a bit about the climate change impact on agriculture, production in Vietnam, CSA, and neighboring policy landscapes, gaps and challenges, CSA prioritization framework, and some CSA practices at the farm levels in Vietnam. And the last is about opportunity to overcome the challenges. First, maybe you are knowing about the severe weather as the impacts of the climate change together with El Nino cycle back, so that over the last year, 2015, and early months of this year, Vietnam has affected severely by the we call the weather, the very severe weather condition. During the winter, we have the problem with the snowing and freezing condition, especially for the north and northwest region of Vietnam. So among this time, more than 150,000 hectares of the green forest, forever green forest, already affected by snow. And you know that we are from the tropical country, and we're affected of the freezing and snowing condition. It's very severe effect to the forever green forest. And rice seedling also affected about more than 8,000 hectares, rice planted more than 10,000 hectares, either crop is close to 20,000 hectares. Industrial crop is more than also close to 2,000 hectares. They're causing the number of the cattle dies is more than 30,000 heads of the cattle dies. And the poultry that also counted for more than 44,000. But the most severe impact now still exists in Vietnam is drought condition and salinity intrusion in the center highlands of Vietnam, center provinces, and also in Mekong River Delta. Up to the middle of April, we already have the problem is severely affected by for the 240,000 hectares of rice. More than 100,000 hectares of the industrial crops, and more than 55,000 hectares of the fruit trees that also affected to the middle of April, already 350 38,000 households lacking of drinking water, and now the numbers went up. Up to now, I think more than 400,000 households already affected of lacking of drinking water. And the loss is now is already up to almost close to the 9 billion Vietnamese dong. In the figure I have in the middle of April is 5,572, but now it's close to the 9,000 already. Especially the effects to the Mekong River Delta with the drought condition and the salinity intrusion, because you know Mekong is the main rice production region of Vietnam. It's produced more than 50% of total rice production in Vietnam and 90% for rice export from Vietnam. So you can see 10 of the out of 13 provinces and the city severely affected by the drought and the salinity intrusion condition, especially in the coastal area provinces like Kiên Giang, Cà Mau, Trà Vinh, and Kiên Giang already like 56,000 hectares of rice affected, or Cà Mau the second at 50,000. And with this very severe effective of the climate shock, Vietnam already called for the emergency support because this effect already threatened the food security of 1.1 million people in the impacted area, causing the malnutrition problem for children close to 30,000, with close to the 40,000 women. And we also worry about the degrees spread threatened about 400,000 because they are lacking of clean and drinking water. And also with the food supply also losing livelihood sources for the 7.5 million people. So we call for support. We already sent, I think we sent to the UN for the emergency support of El Nino with the requirements for support of $48.5 million for the emergency support for like food supply, drinking water, vaccination or something like that. And also we call for the ODA support for the response to drought and salinity in the center, highland, and also Mekong River Delta provinces. We also call for support to improve the institutional capacity and respond to drought and salinity intrusion. So with the CSA in Vietnam, we translated into Vietnamese with the C and SA with the three pillars of the CSA, with the low carbon moving to low carbon or the mitigation, and with adaptation or resilient to the climate shocks. And the very important part of this is the food security. So in Vietnam, we have talking about the enabling policy environment, we have this different policies supporting reform very high level after the Agenda 21-2004. We have a bunch of the different policy, even the law. Especially recently, we have the law on nature prevention and control 2013, the law on environmental protection, and recently last year, we have the new laws passed by the National Assembly, the law on marine and island resource and environment is very much related to the way we respond to climate change. We also have the personal National Sustainable Development Strategy in 2012, or National Green Growth in 2012 also. And we also have the project on the management of greenhouse gas emission 2012, and recently we also submitted our INDC in last year before the COP21. Specifically for agriculture, CSA in agriculture. So under the different level of policy, from the top level of political level, like political bureau of the party, Congress Party, the lead, the ruling party in Vietnam, we also have a resolution for applying the sustainable production. And then recently, agriculture sectors, the Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Development also approved the updated response to climate change action plan of the sectors for period 2016-2020 in the decision 1819, focusing on the different measures in all 6 different subsectors of agriculture, from the crop production, livestock production, aquaculture, forestry, irrigation, and rural development also. All of these policy will also link to the link of the response to climate change policy and action plan with the regular or annual socio-economic development plan. So every year we have the socio-economic development plan, and we have the guidelines how to integrate and mainstream the climate change response measures into the annual social and economic development plan. With that, in terms of the policy landscape, we recognize the importance of interlinkages between the climate change adaptation, sustainable development, and shift to the low carbon economy in agriculture. We can talk a bit later also. The numerous climate change adaptation and disaster risks management measures has been implemented at the national, subnational, and local level also. So the main adaptation measures proposed in the action plan in response to climate change that updated from 2000 for the periods 2016-2020 of agriculture sector already emphasized applying the CSAs and ecosystem-based adaptation and combining between the structural and non-structural measures in response to climate change, not only in agriculture but also in other sectors. However, there are still a lot of challenges and gaps identified during the review of the policy. The first one, the legal framework of integrated CSA practices at the main climate change adaptation measures into the policy phases from backwards. There was, for instance, the limitation, the lack of the concrete policy on the climate change, unbalanced policy, more focusing on the disaster prevention, mitigation rather than sustainable non-structural adaptation measures. CSA is one example. A vague linkage between the currently existing CSA practices with models and the mitigation plan. The CSA concept is quite new and less perceived by the policymakers, scientists, as well as the less imparted to the business and communities also. The CSA framework is now under developing at the nation level, and the adaptation cost keeps rising or the increasing and far from what the country could provide it. The majority of the climate change adaptation funds has been directed towards the improving the climate resilience of high-cost, large-scale infrastructure projects. Most of the fund, according to the World Bank's review last year, I think about 94% is for the agriculture and transportation within agriculture, 63% for infrastructure. The cost of adaptation keep also, as I said, estimate about 3 to 5% of our GDP by 2030, as we mentioned in our INDC. The cost of moving from the business as usual to the low emission development is about 0.2% of our GDP, as the World Bank calculated in 2014. What it means is that without the additional cost of adaptation, only the moving, the technical from the business as usual to the low carbon, we already needs about $400 million per year as the money in 2015. Here is some opportunity to overcome. You can be able to mobilize both international climate change finance and also international development finance to scale up adaptation measures, and the CSA ecological-based adaptation as considered as the key climate change adaptation measure, as already mentioned in the action plan in response to climate change of agriculture and rural development sectors. They encourage and create the favorable condition for the private sector's investment in climate change adaptation activities, including approaches to make value chains more sustainable in the face of the climate change effects, and also applying the feasible CSA practices models in developed agriculture value chains. So in order to address those challenges, we're following the step of the analyzed prioritization framework that is FAO and CIAT developed. So we're going to review and evaluate the current situation of Vietnam, analyzing the promoting factors and barriers, considering the climate risks, identify the policy intervention and guiding for replication and investment. And so we applied the CSA now already undergone with the CSA prioritization framework with 4 phases, applying the method that is I mentioned about the developed by FAO and CIAT, identify in CSA, and then have the workshop to prioritize this CSA, and then we carry out the cost and benefits analysis, and the last we have the final workshop for the portfolio development of different CSAs. And now is we are in the last process of this one. So with the support from the different INGO, Windhoek International, or some other, also we have we did stock taking of the different so-called CSAs. So we map out, you can see from my presentation, we map out different types of the CSAs. So we have the 4 different types of the CSA group, like in agriculture with the blue one, and yellow with in livestock production, and with the forestry, and with the crop production, and combining with crop production. So we use this on the Google web base. So if the people can click on this any dot in here, so that this will be direct to the database with a very big description about we call the so-called CSAs, so that we can try to make it available with additional information and assessment of the possible and condition for apply, so we can soon put in the web, so that farmer or either stakeholder interested can go and see if they can be able to apply this. So here are some CSA practices we already study. The first one is about the Agro-forestry system, combining between the annual crops in the sloping land area in northern mountainous region and central provinces, with the annual food crop intercropped with the forest, food trees, or industrial trees like coffee or pepper in the highland provinces. So the system is diversified the farmer incomes, control the soil erosion, improve the ecosystem and environment, and also contributing to reducing the greenhouse gas emission and carbon sequestration, allows the potential for applying or expanding this sloping land area of Vietnam, because as you know, 2/3 of Vietnam national areas are the upland or the mountainous plain. So you can see from the picture the intercrop between the forest and the tea in the upper picture, and the lower picture is a leguminosa species with the coffee during the rejuvenation period. You also see the shading trees. This is with one kind of the leguminosa species, Sienna, Nghia, or the cashew trees, so that they can have both seeding, increase the holding capacity, water holding capacity of the soil, and also the cash crop they can sell as timber. Especially in the central provinces where heavily or severely affected by the drought condition. So some CSA practices already implemented there by converting from rice crops a year to the crops that use less water, like zucchini, the kinds of the apple, Vietnamese apple, or vines, or the dragon fruits, and combining with the raising the cattle or the sheep and goats, so that they can increase the income, and those animals and trees can have the more tolerant to the drought condition and using less water. In the Mekong River Delta, especially in coastal area, some models of they call the ecological shrimp mangrove forest. So the ecological shrimp mangrove forest system in the coastal provinces to increase the sustainability of the sustainable farmer income, protect the environment, biodiversity, and also reducing greenhouse gas emission. We call the organic farming products can fetch with premium price for the high food safety standards. Now more than 180,000 hectares has been practiced. This also protect and maintain environmental resources, ecosystem, reducing greenhouse gas emission, adapt to the climate change, and ensure the sustainable livelihood of the coastal community. So this mangrove forest aquaculture, and you can see in this picture with the shrimp, and some also they combine in mangrove forest with the fish, or the mix of fish, crab, and either marine products. In the salinity condition or intrusion condition, you can see the picture, and the rice is severely on the rice is now cannot harvest because it's so salted. The saline rate already up to more than even 20 parts per thousand. So by combining the system with rice with aquaculture, especially rice with shrimp, so that during the rainy season they can grow rice, and during the dry season they will raise the shrimp, so that we can increase the productivity of the land, and also can reduce all the tolerance to the salinity condition. So rice and aquaculture system, especially in Mekong River Delta, up to now, almost 7,000 hectares already practiced in 2014, and this also increase the productivity, economic efficiency per unit of area, and protect the environment. Also increase the income and the quality and value chain of fish and rice, because they also, during this time, both rice will use less the input, especially the chemical, and for the shrimp they also almost not using any kinds of the additional or artificial foods for the shrimp. The other system is the household with the pig production. We call the IFS. That is the study I did with the support from FAO, combining from the pig production with the biodigester, so that the waste treatment with the main feature that we're producing the biogas for domestic use, and reducing energy use, better waste management, the convert weight into the energy. So in this system also the slurry can be used as a fertilizer for the crop or mix for the composting with either crop residuals to become to provide as a fertilizer for the either crop production. Up to the 2015, 350,000 biodigester already installed, and 2012 we already sold about 500,000 GSVS, and we get about, I think, more than $1 million US, and we expect to have more in 2014 and 15. So in 14 we're close to the 800,000 already insurance, and this can reduce the greenhouse gas emission up to the 40%. So from those experience and model studies, we have some key priorities for the adaptation measure in agriculture for the CSAs. The first one, we change and shift the crop patterns or the schedule, develop the use of the seed variety resistant to climate change condition in different ecological regions. Up to now, we combine with IRI to test and to breed with more than 10 different rice variety, and we hope that it will have soon 2 kinds of the rice variety that can tolerate to the rest of the salinity condition up to the more than 10, about 10%, 1%, mean 10 parts per thousand. And also the new shrimp variety that can tolerate to the different levels of the salinity. Select and upgrade and modernize the crop and livestock production techniques, which increase the resilience and may also minimize the greenhouse gas emission as the core benefits. Utilize good agricultural practices in crop cultivation, such as the fertilizer and pesticide saving measures, water saving measures, minimizing time for land preparation to reduce the release of methane, and intercropping of cash crops like coffee, pepper, rubber, etc. with the leguminous trees, fruit trees, so that increase both income and protect environment, increase the carbon sequestration. So the scale up of CSA practices such as Agro-forestry, mangrove forest with aquaculture, live fish and shrimp, etc. Finalize the production standard and regulation to ensure that complete value chains from the agriculture production to waste management and increase the resilience to climate change effects. Applying GACSA in livestock production to improve the feed utilization coefficients, reducing greenhouse gas emission and costs, link animal husbandry practices with the feed processing industry, and treatment of the animal waste and producing biogas. Establish the mechanism for the technology transfer, promotes the technology development at the national level, including the development of indigenous knowledge-based technology, applying the climate finance to support implementation of and scaling up adaptation action in agriculture sectors, and develop the national unified CSA framework. Now, as I said previously, we are on the way, and hopefully we will have the first draft submitted to the Minister of Mars in June. So that's all my case study from Vietnam, and thanks for your listening, and if you have any questions.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Sham, very much for this very interesting presentation. So I will start off. We have a couple of questions, and I'll start off first with one that I had, and it's about the mitigation. So you talked about mitigation as one of the 3 main pillars of the climate-smart agriculture strategy. And obviously there have been many efforts recently in Vietnam to implement mitigation measures. Can you please talk a little bit more about what you see as the key emerging lessons from the activities that are currently underway which you may be able to share with the audience? Are there specific objectives that can be achieved at a relatively low cost? In other words, what are some of the key challenges that have come up during the implementation of the current activities?
Okay. So one of the mitigation method we now is try to spread it out is AWD in rice production, because it's as you know, rice production produce almost 50% of the total greenhouse gas emission from the agriculture sectors, and most of the mitigation for emission coming from the methane, from the keeping the water logs all the time in the rice fields. So AWE means alternative rice and wet irrigation system can reduce up to, I think some people said that up to 60%, but we expect about 30 to 40% is good enough. And we're trying to apply also MRV, testing the MRV for the AWE first, because in order to reduce the greenhouse gas emission from different agriculture production, we need to apply and try to have the calculation of the actual different stages along the production chains to see what stages that can produce a lot of emissions, so that we can find the measure to reduce or mitigate those emissions. So within rice, we apply different techniques. AWD, so one of the practices, and I think now we'll continue to expand it. And we now try to develop a kind of policy to encourage the farmer to apply with AWD, especially in the south. However, with the drought condition or salinity intrusion problem, that area may not be suitable for the applying AWD. But we work together with ERE to develop, we call the suitable map for applying AWD. So we're mapping out where it's suitable to apply the AWD in order to reducing greenhouse gas emission from rice production.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Tran. So the next question is from the policy perspective. What are some of the key ways in which countries can enable private sector engagement in scaling up CSA implementation?
As you know, recently in the we get the approval from the lean structure restructuring agriculture program with the two main target is the sustainable production and increase the value added. And with the core of this is the private sectors, because if you heard about our new Prime Minister, he said that we need to consider private sector as the momentum for the economic development. So we try to encourage the private sector, creating the good condition for the favorable condition. And now we are, as the order from our Prime Minister, all the sector have to review on the policy, regulation. That can be like a barrier to prevent the private sector to investing in the sustainable production, so that we can find a way to maybe to improve those regulations or maybe revise it, so that we can be able to encourage the more investment from the private sector in the economic development in general, and especially in applying the sustainable measure in agriculture production in particular.
Great, thank you. So the next question comes from Roberto Azofeifa from Costa Rica. Actually, he's our next speaker next week. The question is, how do you get the farmers to adopt the new technology, and do extension services play a role?
In Vietnam, the extension, we have a very good extension. However, the capacity of because of most of the extension now is still funded by the government. So the farmer don't have to pay anything for extension services. did also encourage maybe help a bit for the farmer, but also maybe also limitation because of the number and the capacity of extension services is quite limited. I think average now one extension service serve for 200 farmer households, so we still lack up the number of extension service. But however, we now is a focus. Maybe we try to encourage not only the extension service from the government system, but also from private sectors. And in Mekong River Delta now we already have, we call the farmer and business linkages. Within those linkages, the businesses, they can provide also their own extension services. They call the FF, mean the farmer friends. So those guys also university graduated, but fund and salary, pay the salary from the company, so they can work with the farmer to transfer the new technology and also helping the farmer following the production guidelines. If we can want to scale up some technology like AWD, we are also proposing we need to work with the company and also to our not only the government system, extension system, but also with the private sector extension system also.
Great, thank you. So the next question is from Andrea Nowak, and she's asking how were these adaptation priorities identified? She's referring to the priorities that you presented in the slide, and who contributed to their identification and prioritization? And the second part of the question is, do these adaptation priorities and needs link to specific regions, or are there practices that can apply to multiple AEZs in the country?
The prioritization process is, as I said, is supported primarily from the CIAT. So we apply the prioritization framework as the setup, I think, for CIAT combination with FAO. But because of the resources funding is very little, so we're calling the support from different NGO and even from the government program also. So we first is prioritizing, identifying different the CSA practices we call the stock taking exercise. So in the stock taking exercise, we send out the form to the own 63 provinces and together with organizing stock taking exercise workshop. So we invite in all the practitioner, NGO, the government, research institution to come and to share where they find out or they know where they have the CSA practices. And so we try to process stock taking it, and then we apply the different, we call the scoring with the panel of the expert to identify the possibility based on 3 different pillars of the CSA. So we have the score it and prioritize and group it in the different types of the CSA, so-called. So we have, I think, after the sending out and stock taking, we have come up with about 800 different types of the CSA circles. And then we have the meeting and prioritizes, and we have the short list, and we group it into the, I think, about 25 different types of the CSA. And from 20 plus different types of CSA, we score it with expert to score it. So we rank from 1 to 20, and we pick up from the 1 to first 10 to go have the deeply study go to the field to study to see the component of CSA, what is the technical feasibility and also the location for application is something like that. And then we come back to put it into prioritization again, and then we pick 8 of this for doing the cost benefits, so that we can be able to bring it to the workshop for portfolio development. As you know, the CSA is kind of very site specific. You cannot have the CSA that fit all. So but we only analyze this based on the overall, related to the providing resilient capacity to the climate shock, or ensuring the food security and contributing for the reduction of greenhouse gas emission or mitigation. And the other factors also take into account is the scalability, because if it's good but not be able to scale it up, then it's also less prioritized. So we put in the national prioritize, and we have some portions, let's say, and in the website, it's as a map I saw, so that the people, if they want to apply it, they can see their own condition, whether it's suitable or not. For instance, we have a suitable map for the applying AWD. So if the coastal area where the effective of the salinity condition is not recommended, because if you drive it out, the salinity will be worse. So this is why we try to providing as much as for possible the information about the model, about the practices, so that either farmer or businesses, if they want to apply, they can see those conditions to see if it's suitable for their own condition or not.
Okay, the next question comes from Peter John Okyo, and he acknowledges the challenge to integrate the CSA into national strategies. And he is asking if this is the starting point. What is the best way to bring this to the attention of the policymakers? So I guess I presume the question are the efforts to integrate CSA into national strategy a priority? Is this the best way to bring this issue to the attention of policymakers? And if there are any success stories in other countries that you are aware of on how this has been done? For the Vietnam case, because we have RIPZN, we have the various kinds of enabling environment, policy environment. But the way we bring it to attention of the policymakers, that is throughout the different workshops, and maybe we have, because we have a very severe problem affected by the salinity and drought condition recently happened in Vietnam. So this also opened a kind of opportunity for waking up the policymaker about how we can integrate or mainstreaming the CSA into those systems. Just last week, maybe you remember, back to the 3 months ago, I sent out the message, a call for the support for the whole system in the GACSA, because of for sharing on the system in the alliance. If they have any experience anywhere that it can be able to cope with prolonged drought conditions, salinity, intrusion, that is shared with us, so that I organize a workshop to invite the people from ERI, from CF, from the CC group, and from either country, if they are available in Vietnam, to join and to share. Here the possible solution to address the problem with the salinity condition in Vietnam that is within us, besides some other measure like asking China to release water from the big dam upstream. But this is too much depend on their decision. But what we can do from our available resources is that we can apply some kinds of experience or practices apply where else in the world is more effective way. So this is also caught attention of policymaker, and we are lucky to have our Prime Minister, Dr. Phat, also very supported in this one, because he also joining. I also joined him to write a book about CSA with FAO. So we received a lot of support from him, a very top leader of the MAP. So. Great. Thank you so much for that. So the next question again comes from Peter, and it's much more specific. So Peter is asking, what is the cost in US dollars of a biodigester in the pig system?
Biodigester in the pig system depend on with the scale of the household scale level. With one digester, I think it's about $400 to $500 US for one biodigester.
Great. So the next question comes from Leah Germer from the World Bank, and she's asking if you're actually using the bioslurry as a fertilizer, and if so, this is very interesting, as often the nutrient value of the bioslurry is lost. And so the question is, how do you deal with the difficulty of transporting the liquid bioslurry?
The small, because of the bioslurry, if you use it directly as a fertilizer, is some with the household scale in Mekong River Delta, mostly for the fruit trees, dragon fruit, so that they usually have the 3 different tanks. The one tank for the making, collecting the wastes and producing the methane and things like that, and then after they have either we call the filter tanks, that is for the making the gases better, and then they also next to that the third one is for the containing the bioslurry, so that they can take the bioslurry from the third tanks to pump directly to the fields, because you see they usually have the pipes to link from the biodigester to from the animal barn to the digester plate, and then from the tanks of the bioslurry to the fields. But most of many places they use this to mix with crop residuals to compost it, so that the compost is the odor is almost no more bad smell, and they can carry out it far away from also for the field, far from their house also.
Okay, so we have 2 more questions, and then I think we're coming close to the end of the webinar. So the next question also comes from Leah, and she it's regarding the cost associated with CSA implementation. And Leah says that the presentation focuses on severe impacts of climate change. How do you see funding streams from emergency support and ODA combining with climate finance to address some of these issues? Do you think about how to frame them as a short-term emergency versus long-term resilience?
Because we have both the emergency support, we're calling for the emergency support because that's the response for the emergency situation now in Vietnam. And I said that it's already affected to the 1.75 million people may be having the problem with the food shortage and the outbreak of the disease and things like that, lacking of drinking water. So we call the emergency support just only providing for the food, for the medicine, and the drinking water. But in the long term, we need to combine and calling for RDA also. And now we're reviving the RDA mobilization laws and strategy for Vietnam, because soon next year Vietnam is graduated from the commission loan, because we have to apply for the commercial loans next year, because we are no longer to get the favorable condition for getting the commercial loan anymore. So the new years we have to apply the higher rate interest rate for the commercial loan. But however, we, as I mentioned, with 3 different calling for the support, emergency support and ODA support for the applying different measures, and especially maybe also with ODA. And the last one, we improve the capacity for the local people and the system to respond to the climate change. So we have, because we committed in the INDC, we submit, as you see from our INDC, within the domestic support, domestic sources, we can be able only to reduce greenhouse gas emission by 8%. If we have the international support, then we can be able to reach at the level of 25% of reduction in greenhouse gas emission in our NDC. So we also put it in the submitting to SASFA, the summary measure of the adaptation measures, and we also calling that is here our prioritize from the Vietnam government, and we need the support in certain areas. So we're calling for the support from CSA and from UNEP for that. And with those, I think we can be eligible to apply the private finance also.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Tran. We have come to the end of the session, and I don't see any other questions coming in. So at this point, I would just like to ask everyone to take the survey that is going to appear on the screen on the right-hand side shortly, just to let us know what you thought about the webinar. Before signing off, I would like to thank you again for taking the time of your evening, Dr. Tran, and to contributing to the knowledge exchange through this webinar. As I said earlier during the introduction, we have other webinars coming up in the next 3 weeks. The next one is going to be on Thursday, May 26th, and it will feature the country case study of Costa Rica. You can register now using the link that my colleague Nghia will post shortly in the chat box, and the information can be found on the GACSA website. So thank you so much again, and thanks to everyone for joining. And I hope I will see a lot of you again next week.
Thank you too for facilitating this webinar.
Sure, thank you. Have a good day.
You too.
Okay, bye.